Erik, you're leading today from the front the rebirth of the New York Cosmos. What an honor it is to be hosting you on the Sport Businessman podcast today.
Thank you so much, Ado. I'm looking forward to it.
Can you give us a background on how your career in the business of sports started and also how you built the know-how that allows you today to be building the rebirth of the New York Cosmos?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and through my college career, it suddenly dawned on me that there's a whole business in opportunity, commercial opportunity behind sport. I always thought of it as a player and, dreamed to play Major League Baseball or in the NBA. And then reality starts to hit when you, you get a little bit older. And yeah, while I was in university, started to think about the business side of sport. And then I was able to, get a few internships, work my way up, and yeah, there's a lot of bootstrapping opportunities for myself.
And it's very, very important your background in that you have in infrastructure and operations management of stadiums as well, which is a key pillar to today building properties and projects around sports and entertainment. Can you dive
Yeah.
into that and how important it is to build that know-how?
Yeah, so for me, as you say, most of my early part of my career, first 15 years or so, was really focused on stadiums, arenas, and events. Um, I worked at the Meadowlands Sports Complex here outside of New York City, and I talk about a training ground. I mean, we had everything. NBA, NHL, Major League Soccer, NFL, all kinds of university activities, horse racing, Grand Prix in the parking lot, concert after concert after concert. Um, and you work insane hours and learn sort of the best case scenarios. And we're recording this on September 12th. I was on the management team at Giant Stadium on September 11th here when the planes hit just across the river, and we became a evacuation center and a resource center. So you have those really horrible circumstances that happen in your career, and you learn from those as well. Also in San Diego, I was managing Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego when wildfires hit in 2003, I think it was, and we were an evacuation site for 14,000 people. Um, it really starts to drive home the importance of culture and family and how facilities like stadiums fit into a city and in an urban dynamic. Um, yeah, so a lot of that has informed my experience. And commercially speaking, mixed use development has been critical for the growth of the business of sports all over the world over the last 20 years. And it's definitely a pillar of our long-term plans here with the Cosmos.
So sounds like an amazing background and expertise in troubleshooting and problem solving for the most important assets which sports properties have. And um, it was announced in the second half of at the beginning of the second half of this year about the rebirth of the New York Cosmos. But I'm very curious, and the audience is as well, about when did you start planning the rebirth of the New York Cosmos, and also what was happening behind the scenes before you were announcing that the New York Cosmos were going to be back, and what does that look like also for builders who want to build projects in the space?
Yeah, I mean it's a really interesting story. There's a lot of layers to it, and it wasn't, you know. straight line from point A to point B. There was a lot of zigzagging going on there for sure. Uh, I was the COO of the New York Cosmos from 2012, the end of 2012 through 2020. Um, and as many people probably know, we had a lot of success at that time in the NASL with the Cosmos and great players like Raul and Marco Senna and winning championships. But unfortunately, the NASL had some troubles. It's a whole nother podcast for another time, I think. But short version is the NASL ended up in an antitrust lawsuit with US Soccer and MLS. Um, and that was really based around professional league standards and MLS and US Soccer working together through a contract with Soccer United Marketing, which we felt was very unfair to everybody else in soccer in the United States. Um, and ultimately, the NASL and the Cosmos, the league was desanctioned and put in a position where the club at that time couldn't continue operating. As it relates to what we're doing now, um, the I worked on the restoration of Hinchliffe Stadium. I was a consultant on that with my business partner on this Cosmos project by Adolfo Wilson. Baez had a very successful career in urban development, was also deputy mayor of Newark, and really part of the renaissance of what's gone on in Newark the last 20, 25 years. And his expertise was brought back into his hometown of Patterson to save Hinchliffe Stadium, which is a National Historic Landmark, was built in the early 1930s and had fallen into complete disrepair. And typically in American culture, something like that, we throw buildings away that are perfectly useful and we start over. Luckily, Hinchliffe Stadium was saved. It tells a very important story for North Jersey, New York metropolitan area, and is a key economic driver in the region. So to have that back really started the conversation of, well, how do we program it? Best way to save buildings and historical monuments is to use them. Um, and so going back 4+ years, really when I got involved with the restoration, it was how do we bring professional sports to the stadium, primarily soccer. So this would have been 2021, end of 2020, early 2021, somewhere around there. Um, and at the time, the Cosmos were deeply involved in the antitrust lawsuit with US Soccer and MLS. So the idea of bringing the Cosmos back was not at top of mind. It was in the back of my mind if someday, somehow, maybe. But it was really about how do we bring professional soccer to this stadium. Um, and, I had some other activities in my career. I went to Denmark for a while. Um, Baye and his businesses in bringing the stadium back over the next couple of years. Um, it just put soccer was, the focus was paused a little bit. It was never completely disregarded. It was just paused a little bit. The focus was on minor league baseball for a while, bringing other events into the stadium. While I was in Denmark, the USL called and was curious about the feasibility of North Jersey market, Hinchliffe Stadium in particular. How could that work with a professional team, both men's and women's? And so really those conversations started around Stadium First, which is absolutely critical, especially here in the New York metropolitan area. If you don't have the right facility, then chances of success are very slim. And that was something that we lived through with the Cosmos out in Long Island in 2013, 14, 15. Um, so yeah, very quickly while I was in Denmark and talking with Baye about the possibility of USL, the idea started to take shape and what we would be and how we would do it. And it's very important to us, as I mentioned earlier, that the stadium's an economic driver, but also that we have a mission to help the community. This region in particular, not just Patterson, but the surrounding communities, really need economic impact. And people need opportunities, they need job creation. The kids in the community need inspiration and aspiration to get to a particular level in their life. It's not necessarily through sports, it could be other things, but to have leaders in their market show them the way and give them internships and jobs, that became a key foundational piece for what we were going to do with the club. Um, and then where it turned towards the Cosmos was early 2025, so this year. So it's probably, I believe it was February, where Rocco Camiso's staff, owner of the Cosmos, also owner of Fiorentina, they saw what we were doing. They saw our stadium plans. They saw the mission around the club, and they really liked what they were seeing and what they were hearing. So negotiations to acquire the Cosmos and make that the centerpiece of what we were doing started at that point. So, yeah, again, early 2025. And to be honest, that negotiation has been the easiest of all the negotiations we've had this year. Getting into the USL is that negotiations, those are always challenging as an expansion team. Um, and so many other things that you work on, a lot of lawyers involved. Um, but the negotiation with Rocco and his people went very smoothly. And it's really down to having a shared vision for what the Cosmos will be in the future.
And so the journals say that you're looking to adopt a European style model. And
Right.
does that come from Rock, or does that come from your vision? How is this going to be implemented in the new New York Cosmos? Can you?
Yeah, yeah, that's it's very important, and it folds into the um, idea of being mission driven and community driven. So a lot of it's from my personal practical experience, working with clubs in Germany, working in Denmark for a year and a half, 2 years, um, seeing what doesn't work in the United States, where there's opportunity, and sort of putting all that together. And what became clear to me was we really don't have clubs like there are in the rest of the world. And when I say club, it's not is it a franchise model? Is it uh, who owns it? Like, that's not what I mean. Is what is happening in the community on the ground, grassroots level. And we really don't have that in soccer in the United States. That in a lot of ways, there's a disconnect between, you know, down on the streets within a few miles of the stadium into how the club operates. And also what I noticed over the last 5+ years, first of all, USL has changed a lot. Second of all, a lot of the success across the United States in soccer is in places like Detroit, Oakland, Madison, Wisconsin, Portland now this year, Portland, Maine, Vermont Green, on and on. Even Cincinnati going back 10 years ago with their growth, FC Cincinnati is very much a grassroots approach, and community driven, and the fans and supporters are driving the club forward. So taking that fact and marrying it with a multi-sport, multi-activity, really modeled after a lot of German clubs, their membership concepts, um, and merging those two things for us, I am sure, is the path towards success, both on the field and commercially. And as I said earlier, the success of the commercial operation is critical, not just for economic development, but to keep the club going and keep the stadium going. So if we're successful in, say, the player transfer market, that money can then come back into the club and we could do more with it. Um, and now with USL having promotion or relegation, there's a pathway for us to move up. to gradually be successful on and off the field, and through the merits of our own activities, move up to the next level. And then if we could continue that model and that growth, then up to the first division, whatever that will be called in the USL in the future. So we knew that was coming. We knew promotion relegation was coming. We had the stadium. We had this vision of a mission-driven club. We married all that together with some commercial ideas that are different and not common in the United States. And we see it very holistically and globally, a much bigger concept than launching an expansion soccer team.
And in regards to the commercial operations development, many European clubs are looking to the United States, in MLS, Major League Baseball, NFL, and even the NBA to learn what is the also entertainment models that we can adopt. However, USL clubs are looking in Europe to learn, membership models for developing the commercial operation. So that was very, very interesting to know about how it's gonna work in the USL markets. But as you mentioned, with promotion relegation coming to the USL in 2027, what does the investment opportunity look like in terms of what are the assets that will generate the revenues for a USL club, and not just a USL club, because the New York Cosmos has been around since the 1970s, and it's definitely different than all other USL clubs.
Yeah, so those are two different things, sort of apples and oranges. The Cosmos are a unique set of circumstances. So I'll take the first part of the question, focus on
Yeah.
the commercial opportunities. Um, so in the rest of the world, the valuation of a club, whether it's Newcastle or Sevilla or Eintracht Frankfurt, um, those valuations are on the annual turnover. How much money does the club earn in a year? And then you multiply it over a number of years and you get the valuation of the club. Um, Here in the United States, a lot of the valuations of the teams is driven by franchise scarcity. Like you simply can't buy it anywhere else. Um, there's only, what is it, 30 teams in the NFL, I think. So the only way in to the NFL is one of those 30 teams, and they're not going to expand anytime soon. And the economy of scale to create an alternative league is so overwhelming, is so massive, and the folks that have tried have often given up pretty quickly because the short-term losses are massive. Um, so that scarcity pushes up the valuation. But if you look at the New York Giants as an example, that were just valued at $10 billion, they're also netting $200 million a year, maybe more. So you have that profit and loss statement that supports a $10 million valuation, not just the scarcity of the franchise, but also the business operation. Um, where things are failing in the United States with this analysis is very few professional clubs at whatever level are making money. Um, so the valuation that's being put on them is solely through the scarcity model. Now, when you start to talk about promotion and relegation, that's a very key economic factor throughout the planet in how you the valuation on a team. So I used Newcastle as an example earlier. They were sold for something like 350 million euros, I think, a few years ago. That was largely on the profit and loss statement of Newcastle and being in the Premier League. But if Newcastle gets relegated, they're not they're not worth 350 million euros anymore. It's something less than that. So how we adapt to that in the United States is something that we all have to work together on. Um, It's an interesting conversation. I just came from the Board of Governors meetings for the USL, and we are talking about this. So, an expansion team in USL Championship a few years ago was valued at something like $25 million. I don't know exactly, but somewhere around there. And of course, it depends on market and other factors. But um, what is that worth now? Um, if teams are facing relegation, what is it worth now if teams have the opportunity to be promoted into a first division league? How do those things change? Mostly it comes back to your profit and loss statement then. And I think that's going to be absolutely critical because then you're forced to focus on your business. You're forced to look at your community, look back inwards and how you're running your ticket sales, how you're marketing your team, merchandise, sponsorship sales, all those things. And those things are what soccer in the United States has lived on, um, and tried to make ends meet. And fundamentally, that's the wrong approach. That's one of three critical tranches of revenue that everybody else in the rest of the world focuses on. It's only one. The other two is television revenue and the transfer market. We, for the most part, the last 30 years have had no transfer market. Generally speaking, MLS, First Division, is not buying players from lower divisions, and spending money down the pyramid that helps fund those teams. Just generally speaking, not happening. It's starting to change, but it's really not there. So you can't rely on developing players and then transferring the players the way the rest of the world. It's the second most important, in many ways, the most important in many leagues and many clubs and many divisions. It's the most important revenue stream. And generally speaking, again, I'm speaking broadly, um, teams are looking at that line item as zero every year. And actually, you just have developmental costs. You're paying to develop your players and then often not realizing anything from that investment. Um, so we as a sport have to look at how do you change that? How do you impact the transfer market? What are you doing to be different? How do you create that new market? That's exactly what we're doing here. There's this um, it's one of the key factors in how we've structured this club. We see the opportunity that player development is very poorly done here, particularly with players in their mid-teens to early 20s. We simply do not have enough professional teams. We don't put our best talent into a professional environment. And then they're not getting the coaching, the daily competition, and most importantly, the matches to develop, the matches to make mistakes, the matches to learn how to to be a top tier professional. Um, so instead of complaining about that, we just said, well, let's go out and do it. Let's focus on younger players. We know in urban areas like Patterson that it's almost impossible for you to come from Patterson, have the typical economic or typical household income that you would have in Patterson and make it to first tier professional soccer in Europe. It's very, very close to impossible. And that's because the infrastructure doesn't exist throughout the player development. If you look at the infrastructure for American football, for basketball, for baseball, it's there and it's largely affordable. And if you have that really high ceiling of being maybe making it to the NBA, you can do that from Patterson. You'll have those bridges, you'll have those opportunities. If you have that skill set for soccer, you can't make it. So it's critical. It's important for us to get out in the community, have a really robust scouting network, and find these kids. The math is very simple. There's 9.5 million people in New Jersey. We have one professional club. There's 10 million people in Portugal. How many professional clubs do they have? Dozens and dozens. And there's a pyramid. And if a player in Porto is playing at a very small club, he'll move up the pyramid within Porto, but also within Portugal. And then next thing you know, he's being sold to a Bundesliga club for 20 million or to a Premier League club for 50 million. And Portugal has the highest revenue generation around player development. And that's with 10 million people. We have 9.5 just in New Jersey. We have 21 million in the New York metropolitan area. And how many world-class players are playing at the highest level from this area? Very few. And that's because we don't have the developmental system. It's not because we don't have the athletes. We don't have the pathway. So again, for us, it's critical to create that pathway, to work with everybody we can work with. Um, Ultimately, we'll be paying training compensation for academies that help develop players. We'll work on solidarity payments in our agreements with those clubs if we sign a player out of their club. Um, and ultimately, we're in the transfer market. And with who we have involved with us, Giuseppe Rossi, our new head coach, Davide Corte, who's spent a lifetime at AC Milan. My experience is other people we're bringing into the organization. We have a vast network across the globe that will give players opportunities to take that next step. But most importantly, they will have spent a few years in our system getting the development they wouldn't get otherwise. So then it's a safer bet for the clubs that invest in our players to to expect that there'll be a return on that investment.
Amazing. And are you building and what a breakdown. And are you building an academy within the New York Cosmos, or you're building a 360 network of clubs to recruit talent from their academies?
We're not building an academy now. Maybe in the
Okay.
future. Um, our focus is so much um, on the players I just mentioned, mid to late
Yeah.
teens. And
Yeah.
many of them are already out there playing. So how do we sign them to a pro contract? It's not about U10 players, U12 players. We're not looking at that. Most of the players have the opportunity to develop there. Obviously, more needs to be done in urban
Yeah.
environments to get kids into good academies. But for now, in the immediate term, we're focused on the mid to late teenage years.
Very interesting.
Um, in the short term, we want as many good working relationships with academies, semi-professional clubs, all over the region. We're not asking for anything. It, we're not saying, hey, you have to pay us money to be in our affiliate network. That's not what it is. What we
Okay.
want is to have a formal relationship where we're working
Yeah.
together on player identification, and they benefit from it as they would if they were academy somewhere else in the world.
Wonderful. Erik, thank you so much for sharing to us the business model of building a USL franchise, rebuilding the New York Cosmos with your new revenue generation methods and through your leadership. It was so interesting to learn about how you're looking to enter the youth development monetization space. And we look forward to speaking again when promotion relegation has started. Developing and after the New York Cosmos has gotten back to winning the trophies it deserves.
Thank you, Ada. I appreciate your time.
Wonderful.